Hi everyone! Today's agenda, synthetic control methods. One of the most important methods in economics for understanding cause and effect. Now, we're going through this method using an example from a paper by Anderson 2019, published in the American economic journal Economic Policy, which analyzed the introduction of a carbon tax in Sweden in 1990. Now, what you see in the graph here on the y-axis is the fuel consumption per capita in Sweden. And on the x-axis, we see time. In 1990, Sweden introduced a carbon tax. And what you see is that gasoline consumption decreased immediately. However, the key question is whether this decrease was actually caused by the carbon tax. It could have been caused by other factors, such as just more people using bikes. So this graph alone doesn't provide a complete explanation. To answer this question, we need to construct a counterfactual. But in this case, we need to compare the actual gasoline consumption in Sweden with the tax versus what would have happened without the tax. The difference is what we call the causal effect of the carbon tax. But the question now is how to get this counterfactual. Problem: since Sweden introduced the tax, it is impossible to directly observe what would have happened without it. The synthetic control method provides a solution, in this case by looking at data from other countries. For example, Norway might be similar to Sweden, and their road sector fuel consumption trends could be compared. Norway did not introduce a carbon tax in 1990, so the difference between the two countries might reflect the effect of the tax. However, this approach isn't entirely convincing, as in this example, Norway's trends before 1990 do not match Sweden very well. The difference likely persists over time, making it difficult to attribute the entire difference between Norway and Sweden only to the carbon tax. Synthetic control instead looks at all possible countries for which we have the data. For example, we might have data from Norway, Denmark, Germany. The key with all those control countries is that they did not introduce the carbon tax. Now, the method calculates a weighted average of these countries, creating a synthetic Sweden that closely matches Sweden's trend before the tax was introduced. This synthetic Sweden serves as a counterfactual, representing what might have happened without the tax. Now, once this synthetic Sweden is created, it is compared to actual Sweden. The difference between the two reflects the causal effects of the carbon tax. Anderson, 2019, exactly did this in his paper. Here you see the countries that he chose and the weights, that is, how much each country contributes to the average. So you see, for example, Denmark contributes 38% to the average, New Zealand 17.7%, Switzerland 6.1%. Now, the authors chose weights based on key predictors such as GDP per capita, number of motor vehicles, gasoline consumption per capita, and so on. The key thing is that this weighted average of many countries very well represents Sweden before the tax introduction, as seen in the graph. The y-axis is the carbon emissions, and the x-axis is time. The dotted line is the synthetic Sweden. the solid line, actual Sweden. Now you see, synthetic Sweden and actual Sweden are very similar before the tax was introduced. Now here comes the key assumption of the method, the common trends assumption. This requires that the trends for the synthetic Sweden and actual Sweden were very similar before the tax and would have remained similar without the tax. This is a key aspect of the synthetic control method. So, the only difference between Sweden and the synthetic Sweden is the carbon tax. Let's see the results. Anderson shows that the synthetic Sweden, so without a carbon tax, trended higher in emissions compared to actual Sweden with a carbon tax. This decrease, around 11%, represents the causal effect of the carbon tax on Sweden's emissions in the transport sector. Now, to conclude, pros and cons of this method. Advantages: a more accurate estimation of causal effects if compared to traditional methods. By creating a weighted combination of control units that closely matched the treated unit before the intervention, synthetic controls provide a good counterfactual, making causal claims more reliable. Another pro is transparency. The construction of the synthetic unit is based on observable characteristics, and the weights assigned to control units are explicit, allowing for an intuitive understanding of how the synthetic group was created. Now, limitations. First of all, data requirements. Synthetic control estimators required a rich dataset with multiple pre-treatment periods and a pool of potential control units. If the data is sparse or the pre-intervention period is short, it may be difficult to construct a reliable synthetic control. Another limitation might be limited applicability, because this method works best when there is a clear intervention or treatment applied to a single unit, Sweden, a country, or a region. Now it becomes less effective for studying interventions affecting multiple units or for cases with diffuse or unclear treatment effects. In these cases, other methodologies can be applied, such as the propensity score matching or the generalized synthetic control, to handle multiple treated units. But those are topics for another time.